But this is who was yelling at me.
Mm-hmm. Like, I consider myself a white person, and it doesn't feel weird to be like, I'm white with Mexican and Puerto Rican ancestry.
Past the houses that they don't want you to drive past, and a lady came screaming out, yelling at me as I was driving. And then I decided to stop my car and put it in reverse and come back to her and roll down my window and called her over to the car. Hi, I'm Danielle Romero, and welcome to my YouTube channel where we talk about American identity and family stories. And what? This is how I do it
over again.
What? No, I'm not doing it again.
You have to do it over again.
Why?
Because I just laughed.
That's okay. My husband, last minute, well, I was going to film this morning, and I suddenly was like, can you just sit in and do this with me? Because I wanted to talk about a comment and ask him what he thinks about it. I posted this on the community page. I'll put it up on the screen. But basically, I think I told you, I went back to do one of the Finding Lola videos, and I like commented on like, here's what I think about it 2 years later or whatever. It felt like a very innocuous video. But there was this one lady, and she was commenting so many comments. And there was one I want to talk about. So this is her. But, so she just said, God, you're a racist piece of SH. What's wrong with being white? What's wrong with having European heritage? Why do you hate white people so much? And this is how her picture, but that's not what she really looks like. I'll show you. I'll put it up.
That looks like Britney Spears when she's doing like the knife dancing videos. It doesn't look like the memory of Britney Spears, but like what she has become recently.
Britney's had a hard time. I mean, and this lady went on a bunch of the other videos and stuff too, and she was just so angry at me, which is really interesting because I don't like saying like white people. When people say they're white, I'm just gonna say that. I don't understand why I get that comment that like I hate white people or like I hate Europeans. I wanted to show you her account, but this is who was yelling at me.
Mm-hmm.
I've had this kind of a lady yell at me in real life, so it's not that surprising. But I just was so annoyed by this comment. I know you always tell me, don't worry about these. When I clicked her page, I got way more annoyed.
I remember you talking about it.
Yeah,
it's hard for me to keep all of them straight, the complainers, but yeah, I remember you talking about it. I don't know why this one bothers you, because to me, just opening this up, I would immediately just dismiss it entirely. Like just seeing the person, I'd say, who cares? Is there something about it that made you particularly upset?
I don't know. I think what bothers me is I know I'm going out of my way to never say a bad thing about any group. I would, especially this video, because this video isn't even like, here's the crazy history of this law case or whatever. It's literally like some interspersed videos of my mom and like my aunts and like my grandmother. And so the idea that you could see that and come away with the idea that that's racist somehow. I don't mind people having a problem with me or whatever, but I just take umbrage with this idea that just because you want to explore something that's like the non-European side, that automatically means you hate white people or you hate Europeans, which is just bonkers. You don't get bothered by this stuff as much as me.
No. Yeah, I couldn't care any less. But I think a lot of like what's happening here, part of it's a generational thing. I think maybe I'm wrong on that, but I think it's like certain groups of people are pretty notorious for like just responding to headlines and never reading it, never following it, never figuring out the nuance of what's being said. Just they see a shocking clickbait headline, get really mad, and bring a bunch of personal baggage into the mix.
Yeah.
And in fairness, I feel like, whiteness has been on attack for a really long time, maybe not a really long time, but over the last few years, it's been pretty well nailed from every direction. As like,
I don't know why.
You're a bad person if you're white, or you're not as good, or you've created all of the evils in the world, all those things. So my guess is someone like this, who's clearly, I know you always ask the question, what is white? I think that's white. I don't think there's much debating that. So maybe it's an extra sensitive thing for her. She's hearing these things, feeling like she's being knocked down a peg for being white, and just can't even listen to what you're even saying.
I think you hit on something, like, we don't really agree totally on this thing. I know people have like asked about that before or whatever because we don't agree, and I think that that's fine. I'm fine not agreeing because we can have conversations about stuff. If she wanted to just ask me, if she wanted to say, well, what's wrong with being white, which whatever, I would be fine having like a little back and forth and being like, well, no, just talking.
This is what's wrong with being white.
Well, no, I wouldn't say that, but I wouldn't say. I read stuff like this and I equate it with if you are looking to understand more parts of your family story, that means that you hate white people or you hate the group on the whole or something. And that's really hard for me to reconcile. But this is not the only time I've gotten this kind of comment.
So I think in the past, other comments you've gotten about this, it's been more about like, why are you trying to dig in and prove that you're not white or something like that? Like, like just acknowledgement of these other ethnicities and backgrounds that you have is somehow you trying to like, you know, claw your way into saying, look, I'm not really white. Because white's bad and all that stuff. So maybe it's all tied into that as well. But yeah, like to what you were saying, we don't totally see eye to eye with this stuff.
Your background is weirdly similar to mine in some ways because Puerto Rican is so similar to Creole. I mean, you actually had a closer upbringing to that side. No, not the Puerto Rican side, but the Mexican side of the family. I've had just a New York experience. Like, I don't have anything.
Yeah, I mean, I had a very New York experience too, growing up in New York. It is weird though, because my Puerto Rican side of the family was all in New York, but we're completely estranged from them. Like, I didn't deal with them in any capacity really. The Mexican side, all of them are still over in Southern California for the most part, but I dealt with them substantially more. So I grew up kind of in this like it was like a two background system of Mexican and English, because my mom's side is completely English, had been there, came over like on the Mayflower, I think, and have been here ever since.
Yes, they have.
But yeah, maybe that's part for me. Like I don't feel like there's anything weird about saying, like, I consider myself a white person, and it doesn't feel weird to be like, I'm white with Mexican and Puerto Rican ancestry. It's like the most reasonable way to talk about it. It's like, I'm not black, I'm not Asian.
You used any, but see, that you're saying Asian. You didn't say I'm not yellow, like, because that would be so weird to say. It's so. But
like they don't call themselves yellow. Like, black people call themselves black. A lot of, at least the ones I've known, many of them have called themselves.
I mean, I know a lot of people do call themselves white.
You know, the race side of it's weird anyway. Like, I'm not going to walk around and volunteer that I am white. If I'm being asked, like, which box do you have to check off here, I'm going to check white. But like, to me, I'm an American person. I'm an American who has English, Mexican, Puerto Rican ancestry.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know, the race piece of it's kind of weird to me anyway. Not that it's not in some way important or whatever, but it just, it's too nuanced at this point. Like, obviously nobody's really agreeing on what is each of these, you know, specific quadrants or whatever that you can fall into. So it feels kind of stupid to even waste your time with that. Like,
yeah. I mean, I will always, I don't ever see it as a waste. I think that.
Well, I just mean like in the argument side of it, like, who cares if you're, you know, technically, are you white or are you off white or whatever? You know? Like, just
eggshell.
You have these certain breakdowns of where your family came from. Who knows where they came from before they settled in those regions? Agree. Like, you know, on the Puerto Rican side, is it the like primarily indigenous island people, or is it the Spaniards, or is it the black people that came over, Africans, I guess, that came over?
Like, yours was all three.
Yeah, but it's like on the whole, like, if you just look at, you know, you grab a group of Puerto Ricans, you see that the breakdowns are going to be very different from person to person.
That's like Creoles too. I mean, it's going to be very different. I think the thing is, my whole channel, it's not like a news channel. It's not where I'm saying, and look how people are being mistreated in this city in 2024. It's so much. I mean, I love history, and so it's always grounded in during other time periods. You may not classify yourself a certain way then, but people were classified these other ways, and it impacted what they were allowed to do. And someone had a comment on this video, which actually a couple people did. It was super interesting. for my uncle Danny, which I know we talked about, his birth certificate and how, you know, they were shocked to see he's colored. And then on it, the long form one, it's like his mom is listed as colored and so is his dad, whose dad was just Irish. And I was like, why would that be? And I was like, well, maybe it's because he wasn't in the room. And so they're just assuming. But so many other people were like, no, it's probably much more likely that it's safer to have the parents be listed as the same thing than separate in the 1930s.
I mean, I don't know. I've
So it
seen
does matter.
seen pictures of them, black and white pictures. I don't know, you know, what they were looking like in real life. Like maybe was he an Irishman that gets kind of tan? Like I don't, but I do think that sometimes, you know, context plays a role too. Like if your great grandmother was really presenting as, you know, more black, if she's looking that way, like what people were at that time expecting to be a colored person, and she's with this guy that, you know, maybe he's kind of in the middle somewhere. If you saw him out by himself, you'd say, oh, it's just a regular Irish guy. But in context, it feels like, is he really, like, I don't know. Maybe he comes off a little bit differently when they're together. I've been compared over the years to the bass player from is it OK Go? Is that the name of the band?
Oh, the Jewish guy.
I think he's Jewish.
Yeah.
And but I looked him up because I was trying to figure out, do I actually look like him? And unfortunately, I kind of do. Like a dollar store version of him.
I'll put him up on here because I know the picture you're talking about now.
But I think he's married to a black woman.
Yeah. Yes.
And when you see them together, it feels like he looks more like he might be like
I know what you're saying.
Biracial at least, or something. Like you can't really, by himself, he just kind of seems like a regular, you know, white Jewish whatever guy. But
I know exactly the picture because you showed it to me, and I was like, huh. I don't know. It's, to me, I want there to be a freedom to be able to talk about this stuff where you're not being accused of just being a racist. You're free to approach your family story however you want. Like, we have very similar backgrounds. Somehow we found each other and did. But the direction we've taken has been so different. Like, there's plenty of things you don't know about your family. You don't know the Puerto Rican family at all. Why did they come over to New York? What was going on over there? All that stuff. But, and I don't mean this in a bad way, you don't really care that much. Like, and I do. And so I don't know what the difference is there, but it bothers some people, I think, when people care versus not caring, you know?
Yeah, I don't know. I think some of it is probably personality difference in general. Like I care about the family stories of the family members that I grew up around and saw. Like they were important to me, so I care about them. Yeah. The ones that were estranged, that's you know, it's interesting to hear some things. Like I went to visit my grandpa right before he died, and I hadn't seen him in a few years, and he saw me, and he was like, "You look just like his Puerto Rican brother-in-law." Yeah. It's like I had never heard that before, but he was like, he was adamant about it. He was saying like, "You really look a lot like this guy."
So weird.
And that made me like a little bit more interested. We'll never find pictures of him because he was like crazy. And
was he in prison?
Yeah, he was in prison for a while. Yeah, I don't think there's any way you're going to actually see what he looked like anywhere. Because this was a long time ago.
I'll look and see.
But yeah, like that, you know, having those kinds of connections brings a little bit more intrigue to it. But outside of that, you know, just based on how I am as a person, my personality is just, well, who cares about those ones? Let's focus on the guys that I know and that, you know, mattered in my story here, which I guess everybody does. They all kind of.
It's okay that you don't care about it. I think
I'm just saying, it's, you know,
we might be really overwhelming.
It's easier, I think, for some people to just write the stuff off and say, well, why are you wasting your time? Don't bother with that. I don't feel like it's a waste of your time to dig into this stuff because I appreciate that, like, we see things differently and these things matter differently to you than they do to me. But I think if I were a more obnoxious version of myself, I could get in there and comment and say, shut up about it. Stop digging in.
Well, I may have found your burner account because I have some other ones. The thing I never know how to get across is I don't have a problem with someone saying they're white. I don't care if you say you're white or even if you want to call yourself yellow. Like I don't, you know, I'm like do whatever you want. I hate this false like equivalent of now you're racist because I don't even know. I don't know. I get called that a lot by these kinds of people who seem like they have a chip on their shoulder. I saw some other people saying stuff too, just it was about the Washington Post article and just the problem with legacy media in general. And I feel like people have been groomed by it to just hate each other. And so now if you see anything that has like certain words in it, you're like getting like a weird trigger instead of just being like, hey, like let me have a conversation across the table from someone who sees things differently than me. Not just like
You probably could, because I have found over the years that people who are really aggressive on the internet are often not nearly as aggressive in real life and are actually a little bit more on the submissive and passive side. So she'd probably be very pleasant if you were actually sitting here in front of her talking.
I want to tell a story, but I have to, and I know you know it, but I have to like hide. Okay. We lived in a place where it was a mixed use community, and there were older people connected to our neighborhood, and they didn't want you driving through their area even though you were allowed to, and it was legal. It was the regular road. They didn't like it. And one time I was driving, and I drive very careful because I have kids in the back of the car. To get back home, I was like 1 second from home, and I was just turning onto my street, but I passed the houses that they don't want you to drive past. And a lady came screaming out, yelling at me as I was driving. And then I decided to stop my car and put it in reverse and come back to her and roll down my window and called her over to the car. And she suddenly was like a whole new person. And I was like, what's your name? And she told me her name very sheepishly. And I was like, why are you waving and yelling at me? She's like, I wasn't. I was like, no, you were. My kids saw. Like, why were you doing that? And she was like, oh, I'm sorry. I was, and whatever. And it was like a total, like, so I do think about the people who are just, they're not thinking this is another person that you could run into, and they're just on there real mad.
You know, I think social media makes it so much worse, and I would count this as social media.
Yeah, it totally is.
There's that feedback cycle of you say something and a couple of people, a couple of just complete freaks are going to like it. No matter what you say, there's going to be somebody out there who's weird enough to like it, even if it's insane. Yeah. And it's that immediate dopamine hit. They start to feel empowered, and then they're looking for that again and trying to be more and more aggressive, more and more jocular just to get a response. Yeah. So well, it's just a messed up world we're in.
It is.
The worst version of itself.
It is the worst version in some ways, but there's been so many wonderful people too. Well, let me know if you want Daniel to find out about his Puerto Rican family. I started to look into it once. I don't think it's
possible.
I started to look into it once. I found the like plane tickets flying out of Puerto Rico to New York and stuff like that. I just can't believe you don't want to look into it. If I had
to look into,
there's so much to look into. If I had time, I'm still trying to figure out my life. I was thinking, we did a live stream once. I was really stressed. My adrenaline was like through the roof. I was just like sweating and shaking with nerves before going live. And you did it with me, and it was actually pretty fun. I want to do another one. I don't know if you want to be on it or not, if you should. So let us know if you want to do that, what you think. And if you haven't seen the one that I did, I think you just type in live stream on the channel. All right, thanks.